Hello there and welcome. Happy New Year. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram.
And I'm Angela Joy, faculty at Evolving Enneagram since October 2020.
Ooh, yes.
Mhm.
So if you have been seeking a compassion-based, contemplative approach to Enneagram informed transformation, you are most certainly in the right place. This is where contemplation meets the Enneagram. So, in this new year, we are launching a brand new series. This is a 12-week series based on the theme evolving toward a unifying vision. I'm so grateful that Angela is here with me because she will be leading the Evolving Enneagram program, evolving toward a unifying vision with me. And so she's agreed to do these Sunday talks as well together. And so we will continue, as usual, to focus on the intersection of contemplation and Enneagram wisdom. But this year, in this session, with this special nod to the power of Enneagram informed contemplation, to foster a more compassionate world, guess what? Through you, through us, through each of us. And so today's talk is entitled Visio Divina and the Enneagram Faces of Unity. And we will take this, Angela and I will take this in two parts. I'll open the conversation first by exploring the Enneagram as a symbol of wholeness and of unity. And then in part two, Angela will guide us through a contemplative practice known as Visio Divina. And then together we will close with an affirmative prayer that we developed we co-created together, affirming the 9 faces of unity that we can each embody around the circle of the Enneagram, right? We can each embody as a unity in our wholeness. So with that, let's begin. As we explore this topic, the Enneagram Faces of Unity, I want to open with a fairly well-known parable about the blind men and the elephant. But I'd like to do this and invite Angela to join me in doing this by sharing it not in story form, but in poetry form. There was a poem written about this parable, inspired by this parable, written by John Godfrey Sachs. And so I think we'll just launch into it. It was 6 men of Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind.
The first approached the elephant and happened to fall against his broad and sturdy side. At once began to bawl, God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall.
The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me 'tis mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear.
The third approached the animal and happened to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up and spake. I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a snake.
The fourth reached out his eager hand and felt about the knee. What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain, quoth he. 'Tis clear enough, the elephant is very like a tree.
The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, Eden, the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can. This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan.
The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a rope.
And so these men of Indostan disputed long and loud, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right and all were in the wrong.
Moral. So oft in theologic wars, the disputants, I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prate about an elephant not one of them has seen.
I don't think it requires very much reflection before we can see how often this happens in our daily lives. You know, so many different perspectives approaching the same thing and seeing something completely different. And then very, very, very sure that what they think they have seen is 100% right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so as we opened this year, it felt like a really apropos moral, if you will, parable to explore some of the our quest for unity, but also the ways that maybe we are barred against it initially by sight, not realizing that we don't see reality as it is, that famous Nhien quote, but we see it as we are. Basically, the Enneagram tells us that we are blind but don't habitually know it. There's a blindness within all of us. And that, again, we don't see reality or in its wholeness, but we see one perspective. And then I'll elaborate to say, from where we sit on the Enneagram, the perspective that we have lost sight of, the facet of God or reality that we don't see, is called the holy idea. If you have the holy idea or enlightened perspective, you see this particular facet of reality with a capital R, this truth. But the situation is that we don't. And so each type has actually lost sight of one particular facet of wholeness. Arguably, we've lost sight of all of them in some ways, but we have a particular sensitivity to one, and then we try to recreate what we thought we lost. So, but the reality is the facet we can't see is why we think life is broken, why we think it's not whole. It's the part that we think is missing. And then, we'll go over the specifics in a second so you can kind of get a more tangible sense of that. I want to check in, Angela, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the thing as you were talking that really stood out to me is that, and that I think is supported in that parable, that we are so sure that we see so clearly when we are most particularly blind. And it feels, and maybe I'm saying it feels because I'm a gut type, but it feels so real, and it feels so true. And the ability to just begin to see that there are other perspectives is the beginning of turning that around so that we're not always just stumbling blind and so sure at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, and as you say that, I do want to add that there are some numbers. There are types that think, oh, like a 9 is going to say, well, but I see multiple perspectives. I see them all. But the idea isn't that you see many perspectives. The idea is that you don't see the perspective you don't see. Right? That's our blindness and the perspective that 9s don't see. Well, stay tuned. I'll share about it in a second. So we'll talk about that. But that's the reality. That's the weirdness of it. It's like, oh, well, I see everybody. That the point is you see everybody else's perspective, but you have trouble finding your own, right? Or claiming your own. And so just recognize that the whole idea is it's not about seeing more perspectives. It's about seeing the totality of what's actually here. The teaching here comes from uh, a perspective I share, which is that reality has wholeness and unity embedded within its very fabric. So that's the underlying assumption, but it's that we don't see it from the egoic or personality-based perspective. But if we are to awaken, kind of just as the Buddhists teach, like if we experience enlightenment, it's a shift of perspective, first and foremost. It's a shift in consciousness. It's a shift in consciousness before it's a shift in the world. And that's the other piece of why we felt it was important to bring this forward of like when we're doing this inner work right now, especially amidst some of the chaos and pain and challenge of the world, the instinct to first fix the world rather than rather than coming from a healed consciousness in order to show up in the world. Like that reactive aspect comes from this assumption that we know what even needs fixing or changing, right? And so instead coming back to our place of contemplation where we reunite with this knowing of oneness and we open to this greater enlightened perspective. Yeah. So with that, I want to launch into the holy ideas. So on page 10 of Facets of Unity, this book by Almas, he teaches that the holy ideas constitute a map of the view of reality as unity, right? And be we might have lost connection with one more than the other. And so I'm going to go through each of the Enneagram types inviting Angela to chime in whenever she feels called to just share around the circle of the Enneagram what these holy ideas are around the entire circle. And you can sense into the one for your number, but I invite you to really hold the space of imagine a world where this truth is known across the board, no matter what our Enneagram numbers, right? So at point 8, the holy idea is holy truth, the perception that there are no divisions and no duality between things. In short, all is one, right? There isn't us versus them. All is one. At 9, the point is holy love. And this can get confused. This is not about the feeling of love. This is not even about the essential aspect of love at the core of our being. It's about love as this objective reality. Another way of describing it is the word in Sanskrit, Satchitananda, which is a word that describes this beingness or truth as being blissful, peaceful, joyful, all of those things combined, that truth being expressed naturally is bliss. So another way of describing holy love is pure, unalloyed blissfulness. And those are the words that come from Almas himself in this book, Facets of Unity. And so again, I like this because you know how many 9s won't seek that sense of harmony. It's like a substitute for this knowing of this true intrinsic blissfulness of reality itself. And then we move into point 1. At 1, holy perfection is the holy idea. And this is the knowing that reality is innately good and perfect as it is fundamentally. And so, again, at the ultimate level of reality. And so these first 3, 8, 9, and 1 represent a view of reality as it is. And now we move into 2, 3, and 4, which represent this view of our participation in relation to reality. So at 2, the holy idea is holy will, this idea that our action is I'm sorry, that our will is not separate from the will of the universe. And so at that point of 2, it's that wants, the wanting of life, the desire of the universe, it's being met, but there's one want, there aren't competing wants. And so at point 3, which is represented by both holy law and holy hope, there's this idea that the movement or activity of the universe, there's only one activity of the universe. And it's this moving in this harmonious flow. And so at point 3, in its highest expression, we know this. Right? Then at point 4, holy origin is the holy idea that every expression, every unique expression in the manifest world is the expression of one origin, one source. Sure, it can differentiate, but it's still at core oneness. And so there's no separation between that which appears and that which is the very source of thing.
Mm.
And so with that, do you have anything to add to that, Angela?
I just, as you were sharing that, I was struck with this thought that if we were really coming from a place where we believed that there was one will, one action, and one source, that that's really where we are all coming from, that it would shift the entire conversation of everything that we do, you know? So yeah, that just kind of hit me in a new way as you were unpacking that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of the point. I think that we were talking earlier about this, and I think I'll close with some words by Almas, but the call that we're talking about is a high call. We're not just talking about, okay, fix your life a little bit, right? We're talking about a complete paradigm change of what is possible within the realm of spiritual transformation if we're willing to commit to this practice of opening up to this deeper truth. Like, how would that look in the world, right? Like naturally, not because we should, but something that expresses from the knowing that is already within us. And again, in process, for me, but more and more as I steep in this, it becomes more intimate, closely available, and something that feels like accessible, just even going back to Jesus, how often people will like put Jesus on a pedestal, like worshiping Jesus versus living the model or the example, so yeah, thank you. And then finally, we'll move into 5, 6, and 7. And according to Alma's, this is the view of humanity in relation to reality. And the way that this is my personal take on it, what I see that as is it's almost like our place or position in relation to reality. And when you think of the head types, 5, 6, 7, there's like uh, there's an equating of those types with the need for certainty, right? Insecurity, like a sight, a seeing. And so I want to relate each of these to that. So at 5, there's this holy idea of holy omniscience. And it's as if like each of us are the eyes of the universe, right? But unlike the 5 personality type that believes I'm the eyes observing and I'm separate and I'm over here and I'm isolated watching you, these are the eyes of the universe observing itself, that you are not separate from that which you observe. And then at point 6, holy faith. Holy faith is the recognition of essence as the very ground of my being, right? And so by recognizing that essence, there's a direct line to like the strength that naturally flows, the perseveringness of faith that naturally flows from the knowing of that like, inner solidity, as opposed to feeling separate from your own essence. And therefore, no wonder the world is an insecure place where you need to scramble, right, for security. So imagine just the knowing of essence as your nature. And then finally, at point 7, holy plan is the holy idea. Just knowing that things are unfolding according to a certain design. So the vision of that. Oh, sevens have this remarkable ability to imagine and see in your head. But what it does is instead of allowing for the seeing, the calm seeing of that divine plan, the seven's like, I will make my plans. I will design my own chart, right? And so imagine if you just could see the way that this divine or universal plan is unfolding beneficently, right? And that you don't need to fantasize or imagine how things might or should be. What kind of world would we live in if we all had access to this perception and this knowing? So, this enlightened perspective. And what if we join together in this shared vision, right? Where all the blind men is sort of like begin to see, and that shared seeing becomes this unifying vision for the world. So, moving into part 2, then I'm going to hand it over to Angela here, and as to share about the steps for Visio Divina, and then to lead us into a guided practice.
This is a practice in which we are able to live through our perception and see what we see. So Visio Divina literally means, kind of like a divine seeing, or looking at something in direct experience with the spirit. And because of that, as Thomas Keating shares with us, it's like a conversation. So while I will kind of unpack for you maybe what we would call the steps of Visio Divina, just keep in mind that it's really more of a conversation that will flow, between you and spirit. And so you may find that you spend more time on the Visio step, just being saturated in gazing upon, the image that is chosen. You may kind of go back and forth. And so there's no hard and fast rules here. It is particularly just an intention to contemplate by using an image to do so. And so the first step is Visio, in which with the spirit, we gaze upon an image. And of course, we're gazing at this image with the eyes of our heart. It's a challenge to like move beyond just our analytical mind and perhaps seeing it, to take it apart and to look at the different pieces, but to be able to gaze at it with the heart and take it in and see how that begins to open up the conversation, which then generally naturally leads to meditatio or meditation. And that's when, as we are attentive to the image and things begin to kind of come up for us, there might be something in the image that really attracts our attention, then we're kind of invited to reflect upon that and look on that more deeply. And then the next step is oratio, or praying from the heart. And this is our invitation to respond. And so, like a conversation, we listen, we pay attention, we watch, we gaze, and then we have this opportunity to respond. And so, this is that space in which we get to pray on what it is that arises for us. And then there's contemplatio, or contemplation. And this is resting in God's presence or spirit or whatever word has meaning for you. And this space of rest is this area where we get to just kind of hold all of it. We get to hold the prayer, we get to hold the image, we get to hold that which brought our attention and rest in that and kind of let it saturate us. And then from there, the final act, if you will, is actio, which is re-engaging from this resting place. But the energy that comes from that rest and the ability to respond and ask the spirit, how do we live this out? And that living it out is an act of prayer. I'm sure that you can see that there are infinite ways in which a number of us would respond to this practice. And within that, there are these 9 universal patterns that we see with the Enneagram that might arise. But the unity in it is that we're all looking at the same image and we're all conversing with the same spirit. And so to be able to practice this together, we might even choose to share with one another what it is that we see, or you can practice it by yourself and then engage in that conversation with the spirit. We will be sharing an image with you and going through these steps, and I will again just invite you into each of those steps. But if you would like to do this, of course, we always invite you to close your eyes before you begin, to set that intention to meet the spirit there. And you are also always invited to stop the recording at any time, especially if you find that you want to stay at a particular step or go back and forth. I invite you, as we share an image with you, allow me to guide you through these steps. So as you take in this image, allow yourself to settle into spirit, into the space that you find yourself, and simply gaze on it with the eyes of your heart. Allow yourself to just take it all in. Of course, at any time, feel free to pause. And as you take in this image, I invite you to meditate on it. What elements are showing up for you, are catching your attention? Feel free to reflect upon that. Maybe asking yourself some questions as far as what is showing up. Does it seem to have some meaning for you? And from this space, your prayerful response, especially keeping in mind your connection to spirit here. How is your heart opened up simply by gazing upon this image? taking a moment of contemplation to rest in divine presence, letting go of your attention to all the details, and simply rest. And finally, as you get ready to prepare to leave this space, is praying to the Spirit, asking, how is it that I can live this out? What caught my attention? In what ways the Spirit taught me something? What can I take from this space and then apply in my life? And you may also want to pray for the wisdom and attention and discernment to see what arises in your life that you might be able to apply what came out of this practice to what arises for you that day. Amen.
Thank you. We'll close right now with just a very brief closing prayer that for us represents enlightened perspectives from the 9 different points on the Enneagram, inspired by the holy ideas. So consider that this practice of Visio Divina that Angela just led us through invites us to see exactly that, to expand our sight, to see from a more divine perspective. And for those who come from the more Buddhist or other perspectives, it might be simply the word enlightened or wisdom perspectives. So use the language that fits you the best as we close here now with this prayer around the circle of the Enneagram, starting at point 8.
All is one.
Life is bliss.
Reality is perfection.
There is only one will.
There is only one activity.
There is only one source.
We are inseparable.
We are strong,
We are present.
and so we are.
Mhm.
Amen. Thank you for joining us here today. Many blessings. We hope to see you in our contemplative practices and the Enneagram groups this week, or possibly in the Evolving Toward a Unifying Vision program that launches this coming Saturday. But even if you're just here for the YouTube talks, I hope you feel so very welcome, and we look forward to this journey together. Many blessings. Take care.
Bye.